I never imagined that something as innocent and wholesome as roasting marshmallows would lead to a 911 call and a neighborhood feud. But when you live near someone like HOA Karen, anything can become a federal crime in her eyes. It all began one peaceful Saturday evening, the kind of evening that makes all your hard work feel worth it. I had finally taken a break from my crazy work schedule and brought my family to our Lake Cabana quiet place surrounded by tall pines, fresh air, and the sound of birds chirping. The lake was glassy and calm, reflecting the orange-pink sky. As the sun set, my wife was curled up with a book on the porch. My two kids were playing tag near the dock, and I was doing one of my favorite things, building a fire in our designated fire pit. We had stacked wood, matches, and a pack of giant marshmallows ready. The smell of wood smoke started rising into the crisp air, and before long, we were all gathered around, toasting marshmallows and laughing. My daughter dropped one into the flames and squealed, and my son tried to see how burnt he could make his without it falling off. It was one of those rare moments where everything just felt right. Then came the shrill voice that shattered the peace. "Are you out of your mind?" We all turned to see Karen standing across the boundary of her property, arms crossed, wearing a sun hat and that signature disapproving glare. "Open flames aren't allowed. I'm calling the police." I blinked, confused. "It's a fire pit, Karen. I had it professionally installed. It's up to code and far away from any trees. We're roasting marshmallows, not launching fireworks." She didn't care. She held her phone in the air, like it was a badge of authority, and dialed 911 right in front of us. "Yes, there's an illegal fire happening. It's dangerous. You need to send someone immediately," my wife whispered. "Is she serious right now?" My son looked nervous, and my daughter started crying. Karen stood there like she was protecting the world from apocalypse, acting as if our fire pit was about to burn down half the county. About 15 minutes later, a sheriff's deputy rolled up in a patrol truck. He stepped out slowly, looked at the scene, family fire pit, marshmallows, and sighed. "Evening, folks," he said. "We got a call about a fire." "Yes, officer," Karen shouted from behind her fence. "They're burning illegal fires. It's a threat to all of us." The deputy walked over to the fire pit, glanced at the flames, then turned to me. "You got a permit for this?" I pulled out the laminated sheet I kept in the cabin drawer for situations exactly like this. "Yup, fire marshal approved. And it's part of my land. The fire pit's professionally built and has proper clearance." The officer looked it over, nodded, and handed it back. "Looks good to me. You folks enjoy your night." He gave Karen a polite wave, then returned to his truck. Karen wasn't having it. "That's it, you're just going to leave," she demanded. The deputy paused, leaned on the truck door, and said, "Ma'am, this is a legal setup. He's roasting marshmallows with his family, not committing a crime." And with that, he drove away. Now, any reasonable person might feel a little embarrassed after being told off by law enforcement. Not Karen. She stood there for another 10 minutes, muttering to herself and shaking her head. Then she stomped off, heels crunching on the gravel, like she was marching into battle. I thought it was over. I thought maybe that would be the end of it, but I was wrong, dead wrong. That Marshmallow Night wasn't just a trigger for was a declaration of war, and I had just unknowingly signed up for the battlefield. The next morning, I found a paper taped to my cabin gate, an official-looking document from the HOA with violation notice in big red letters. The reason: open flames and unauthorized fire activity on HOA-regulated land. My eyebrows raised. My land was not regulated by the HOA. My property had been grandfathered in before Karen ever moved in, but she didn't care about facts-only control. I called the number listed, and after being bounced between two different board members, one finally admitted, "Well, Karen filed the complaint, and as HOA president, she believes it applies to you." I laughed. "Believes? This isn't a religion. Show me where in the bylaws it says I can't roast marshmallows on my private land." There was silence on the other end. Then the line went dead. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about safety or concern. This was about power. Karen wanted to make an example out of me, and she thought calling the cops on my peaceful family night would be the first step. But she underestimated one thing: I don't back down, especially not when it comes to my family, my property, or my freedom. Over the next few days, I started noticing more petty things. A car slowly driving past the cabin, taking photos. My mailbox suspiciously damaged. Trash mysteriously appearing near my driveway. It was like a passive-aggressive attack campaign. Karen wasn't letting it go, and the HOA wasn't going to stop her. I started gathering evidence, documenting every weird incident, every baseless complaint, every HOA letter I received. What she didn't realize was I was already preparing my counterstrike, not with noise or drama, but with facts, leverage, and a bit of well-earned revenge. Because while Karen was busy playing neighborhood cop, she forgot something critical. I built this place with my own two hands. I know every inch of this land, including what lies beneath it. And she was about to learn what happens when you poke the wrong bear. Marshmallows were just the beginning. The morning after the marshmallow incident should have been peaceful. The birds were chirping, the sun was shining, and the lake was still as glass. But instead of enjoying my coffee in peace, I found myself staring at a ridiculous violation. Notice slapped onto my gate like some kind of scarlet letter. The bold red letters screamed unauthorized fire activity, and beneath it, a fine of $250. I couldn't help but laugh. My fire pit had been approved years ago with all the right permits. I knew for a fact it was within the legal parameters, not just county laws, but also fire safety regulations. I had even called the fire department myself back when I installed it to make sure everything was done by the book, but now, thanks to Karen's overblown ego and paranoia, I was being fined by an HOA that technically didn't even govern my property. Asterisk, you see. That was the funny part. My lake cabin sat just outside the official HOA boundaries. When the neighborhood was first developed, my land was kept separate due to a private deal I made directly with the original builder. It gave me lake access, utilities, and complete independence from the HOA, something Karen apparently didn't realize or chose to ignore. But it didn't stop her from acting like she ruled the entire region. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she'd overreacted in the moment and would cool off. I called the HOA office and spoke to the assistant. She told me Karen had demanded the violation be issued and claimed that my illegal fire put the community in danger. I explained that my property wasn't under HOA control. The assistant stammered and admitted she wasn't even sure where the HOA boundaries stopped. Asterisk, it became clear Karen was using her influence to bully me, and it didn't stop there. Over the next week, I received 3 more notices. One for excessive noise during our marshmallow night, which was laughable since we'd been quietly chatting around the fire. One for unauthorized structures, meaning my fire pit and my dock, and another for disturbing natural wildlife. That last one was because my dog, Max, had jumped into the lake to fetch a stick. That's when I knew this wasn't about rules or safety. This was personal. Karen had decided I was her new target, and she was going to do everything in her power to make my life difficult. Every little thing I did, no matter how harmless, was being scrutinized and weaponized. She even began walking past my property with a clipboard, taking notes like some kind of rogue inspector. My wife was uncomfortable. My kids started asking why the angry lady hated us. And I was getting furious. Asterisk, so I started documenting everything. I set up security cameras. I saved every notice, took screenshots of every email, and recorded every strange incident, like how my trash cans were suddenly tipped over, or how one of my security lights was mysteriously smashed one night. I wasn't going to let Karen bully us into silence. I contacted a local real estate attorney and showed him everything. He confirmed what I already knew: my property wasn't under HOA jurisdiction, and they had no legal standing to fine me for anything. He helped me draft a formal letter demanding that the HOA cease all attempts to enforce policies on my property or face legal action. I delivered it myself to the HOA board's next meeting, and when I walked in, you'd think I had stepped onto enemy territory. Karen was there, seated at the head of the long table, arms folded, expression smug. I handed the envelope to the secretary, nodded politely, and left. Asterisk, that might have been the end of it if Karen wasn't so determined to keep the war going. A few days later, I got another letter. Not a violation this time, but an official HOA motion to suspend my lake access privileges due to repeated violations of neighborhood safety rules. My eyes nearly popped out of my head. Suspend lake access. That lake bordered my property. I had the original title deed stating my direct, private access to it. The HOA didn't own it, they only managed shared access for certain homes that didn't have direct frontage. Karen was clearly trying to punish me by any means possible. But this time, she'd overplayed her hand. She didn't realize that while she was busy with her fake fines and patrols, I had been researching something far more serious, something she had never expected, and it was hiding just beneath her feet. Asterisk, back when this side of the neighborhood was first built, I had partnered with a small utility contractor to help install water and sewage infrastructure. Many of the homes, including Karen's, were tied into a water supply line that ran directly beneath my land. At the time, the HOA and original developer had asked permission to run the pipe through my soil, and I agreed, under one condition: formal easement agreement that would expire after 10 years unless renewed. I pulled the dusty folder from my cabin's storage closet and read through it. Sure enough, the easement had expired 5 years ago. No one had renewed it. No one had even contacted me, and that meant every drop of water flowing into Karen's home was doing so illegally, trespassing underground, with no permission. Asterisk, I called my lawyer again and showed him the documents. He smiled and said, legally, you have every right to shut it down. That was all I needed to hear. I wasn't the kind of guy to strike first, but after the weeks of harassment, the false complaints, the 911 call over Marshmallows, it was time to act, and I was going to do it quietly, legally, and without drama. Karen had turned my peaceful life into a circus. But now, the curtain was about to close and she wouldn't even see it coming. So I made a few calls, hired a professional contractor, and began preparing for the next step. Karen thought she could manipulate the rules. But she forgot something crucial. The rules work both ways. And when you push the wrong neighbor too far, you might just find yourself high and dry lipped. Saturday morning arrived, and with it, a quiet energy I hadn't felt in weeks. I stood on my porch, coffee in hand, watching the still lake while the soft hum of a contractor's truck pulled into my gravel drive. Today was the day I reclaimed my peace, not with shouting or threats, but with the power of legal leverage and patience. The contractor stepped out, gave me a respectful nod, and we walked the length of my southern property line. There, buried beneath a flagged section of dirt and stone, lay the very thing that Karen never thought I'd touch. The old, expired water line that supplied her home. The crew began carefully exposing the pipe, working with precision to avoid any disruption to the other lines that fed homes legally connected under active agreements. I'd done my homework. Only Karen's home still depended on this forgotten, unrenewed line that ran under my land like an invisible trespasser. Once the pipe was visible, my contractor looked at me and asked, "You sure about this?" I nodded. "Cap it completely. Clean and legal." He smiled and got to work. Within a few hours, the deed was done. Karen's illegal water supply was now cut off. No warning, no note, just the reality of her arrogance catching up with her. I didn't have to lift a finger. I let the documents, permits, and the expiration date on the easement do all the heavy lifting. By noon, I was back on my porch, enjoying the sweet sound of nothing, no HOA letters. No shouting neighbor, just the occasional splash from ducks in the lake. The next morning, the peace shattered. I was on the porch again, reading a book, when I heard the furious screech of tires, followed by the unmistakable shriek of a voice that had haunted my family for weeks. Karen had arrived. She stormed up to the edge of my gate like a tornado, in designer sunglasses, waving her phone in one hand and yelling incoherently, "You cut my water off. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I stood slowly, calm as ever, and walked toward the gate. "Good morning, Karen. Lovely day." She nearly lost it. "This is criminal. I'm reporting you. You can't just shut off someone's water." I pulled a folder from under my arm and held it up. "Actually, I can. This is the easement agreement your water line was using to cross my property. It expired 5 years ago. No one ever renewed it. You've been using it without legal permission ever since." She snatched the folder from me, her eyes scanning the papers, growing wider with every line. "This can't be right," she whispered, almost to herself. "You need to fix it." Immediately, I shrugged. "Not my problem. You should have renewed your rights to the line. And maybe, just maybe, if you hadn't called the cops on my family for roasting marshmallows or harassed us with fake violations, I might have considered letting it slide. But that bridge, you burned it." She threatened to call the city, the utility company, and even the mayor. I told her to go ahead. I had every document ready for anyone who wanted to challenge me. And with that, I turned around and went back to my porch, leaving her sputtering at my gate like a malfunctioning robot. Over the next 48 hours, the chaos at Karen's home unfolded like a slow-motion disaster. First came the plumbers. Then the angry phone calls I ignored. Then, apparently, she tried to tap into a neighbor's line using a garden hose, which resulted in another complaint, this time filed against her. She finally had to pay for a new, fully rerouted water line to come in from the main road, and since her property sat at the far edge of the neighborhood, it cost her nearly $15,000 in installation and inspection fees. Poetic justice, if you ask me. But it didn't end there. The next HOA board meeting was called under urgent circumstances. I attended not because I had to, but because I wanted to watch what would happen when the queen bee got swatted. Karen arrived, looking stressed, hair messy, a folder of accusations in her hands. She went on a wild rant, accusing me of sabotage, illegal behavior, and undermining the integrity of the HOA. When she finally stopped for air, I calmly stepped forward, pulled out my paperwork, and explained everything to the board in simple, indisputable terms. My land, my pipe, expired easement, legal rights, no violations, period. The board, made up mostly of her loyal lapdogs, looked stunned. One member asked, "You mean she's been using your water line without permission all this time?" I nodded. "Yep, and harassing my family while doing it." That's when things shifted. Several residents, ones who had previously stayed quiet, stood up to speak. One woman talked about how Karen fined her for planting the wrong type of flowers. A man told the story of getting a notice because his truck was parked half an inch over the curb. Another revealed how Karen threatened to call animal control over their barking dog during a thunderstorm. The stories poured out, and the board listened. At the end of the meeting, the board voted to strip Karen of her position as HOA president. Just like that, the crown she'd clung to for years was gone. She stormed out of the meeting, red-faced, humiliated, and speechless for the first time in her life. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just walked out calmly, satisfied that karma had finally caught up with her. Back at the lake, life returned, to normal. My kids played in the water. My wife read books on the porch again, and we hosted a marshmallow roast the very next weekend. This time, more neighbors showed up. We had music, laughter, and even the local sheriff joined us for a few minutes this time off duty, sipping lemonade and thanking us for inviting him. It wasn't just a fire pit anymore. It was a symbol that no matter how loud someone yells or how many fake rules they wave in your face, truth, patience, and a little legal knowledge go a long way. Karen never spoke to me again. She kept to herself, avoided eye contact, and quietly tried to rebuild her reputation, but she knew, everyone knew. She tried to drown my peace and paperwork and threats, and I turned off her tap literally. It wasn't about revenge. It was about standing up when someone thinks they can bully you into submission, and all it took to win was one line buried underground, forgotten by her, but never by me. The week following Karen's dethroning was eerily quiet, almost suspiciously so. No letters in the mail with fake violations. No HOA notices taped to my gate. No screaming fits from across the property line. For the first time in weeks, the tension had lifted from the air like fog burning off under the morning sun. My wife and I enjoyed morning coffee without fear of being watched. My kids played on the dock again, laughing without flinching every time a car drove by. The peace we had fought so hard to protect had finally returned. But even though Karen was no longer HOA president, I knew better than to believe she was done. People like her don't just give up, they regroup, they sulk, and then they try again. Still, I had taken back control of my land, my lake, and my life, and it felt good. News of her downfall spread quickly. The neighbors, emboldened by her loss of power, began coming out of the woodwork. One by one, people stopped by to shake my hand, pat me on the back, or simply say, thank you. One older gentleman, Mr. Redman, who lived 2 streets over, brought over a box of homemade cookies and said, I've lived here 20 years. No one's ever stood up to her like that. It became clear that I hadn't just fought for my own place, I had become the unlikely hero of a silent majority. The stories I heard were wild. Karen had fined a family for having a trampoline visible from the road. Another couple got a citation because their Halloween decorations were too frightening for children. A teenager got a violation because his car's muffler was too sporty. It was like she treated the HOA rulebook as her personal weapon, flipping through pages until she found a rule to twist and aim at anyone who dared to enjoy life. But now the spell was broken, and I had no intentions of letting it return. A few days later, I noticed a plumbing van parked in Karen's driveway. For hours, workers ran hoses, inspected lines, and dug up sections of her lawn. I knew exactly what they were doing. Her brand new water line, this time legally sourced and nowhere near my land. I didn't watch long, didn't gloat. I had already won, but it was satisfying to know she had to spend thousands to fix a problem she had caused entirely by herself. A few neighbors who had suffered under her HOA rule watched from a distance too, not out of spite, but curiosity. For so long, Karen had been untouchable. Now, she was just another neighbor. Later that week, I received a surprising knock on my cabin door. It was one of the new HOA board members, a soft-spoken woman named Delia. She'd voted to remove Karen from the board and now stood there nervously holding a manila envelope. I just wanted to say thank you, she began. What? You did. It gave a lot of people courage, including me. She handed me the envelope. These are all the violation notices filed against your property. We've reviewed them, and the board agrees they were issued without proper authority. We're expunging them. I opened the envelope to find all 4 notices, each one stamped, with a red void across the top. I looked up, stunned. Seriously? She nodded. We're also revising our guidelines to make sure things like this don't happen again. No one should have to go through what you did. I thanked her, and as she left, I couldn't help but smile. It wasn't just a personal win anymore. It was a neighborhood shift. With the past finally behind us, my family decided to host a small celebration. Nothing too loud or flashy, just a relaxed lakeside cookout with a few neighbors, kids splashing in the water, and of course, a roaring fire pit with marshmallows. This time, the invitation was open, and to my surprise, nearly 20 people showed up. People I hadn't spoken to much before. People who had been too scared to stand up to Karen. They came with coolers, side dishes, desserts, and stories. We shared laughs, grilled burgers, and toasted marshmallows like it was our first night at the lake all over again. And then came the most unexpected moment of all. As twilight fell and the fire crackled, someone pointed to the end of the path. There, standing awkwardly in khaki capris and a cardigan, was Karen. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't holding a clipboard. She wasn't even walking with that usual aggressive stomp. She just stood there, looking around, unsure of what to do. The crowd went silent. Everyone noticed her. Some tensed up, a few whispered. I stood up from my chair, walked over to her calmly, and waited. She spoke first. I wanted to apologize, she said quietly. I let things get out of hand. I thought I was protecting the neighborhood, but I see now I was just controlling it. Her voice trembled a little. You didn't deserve that. I wasn't sure what to say at first. Part of me didn't believe it, but another part of me saw the defeat in her eyes. The understanding. Karen, I said, you made things hard for a lot of people, but it's never too late to change that. She nodded slowly. I just want to be a neighbor now. That's all. I looked back at the fire, the families, the laughter, then start by grabbing a marshmallow stick, I said. She blinked, surprised. I handed her a skewer. Let's call it a fresh start. The evening carried on, and while Karen didn't stay long, her presence and her apology marked something important. Not redemption, maybe, but the beginning of understanding. People make mistakes, but when they're willing to admit them and change, maybe they deserve another shot. The truth was, I didn't roast marshmallows that night just for the sweetness. I did it to prove that joy, freedom, and family are worth defending. It means standing up to the loudest voice in the neighborhood. And this time, the only things getting roasted were the marshmallows, just the way it should be.